So I've been sitting on some information these past few weeks that I didn't want to make a video on because I want America to move on from the rioting and looting over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. But at the same time, this story isn't going away. And while this is not exculpatory reporting for the officers in question who permitted this man to die on the pavement of Minneapolis, I believe in reporting the factual truth and also pointing out things that the news media, for their own motives, have no desire to pass on to their viewers and readers. So, if you look at this mugshot of the four Minneapolis police officers, right away you can identify the fact that this is a diverse group of Americans. You could not get more diverse than this group of Minneapolis police officers. These police officers were hired by Democrat politicians. The police training was conducted by and overseen by Democrat politicians. Everything about this police department in Minneapolis has been overseen by the Democratic Party since 1932. If you'll go back and look, Minnesota has been a Democrat-run state since 1932, almost 90 years ago. So if you look at these officers, two are clearly Caucasian, one is clearly Asian, and the fourth, we would all agree, is not Caucasian. They're all Americans, and when you talk about how the death of George Floyd is white versus black, which is how the news media was eager to report this story. They wanted to exacerbate racial tensions. They wanted to instigate racial animosity. The national news media, the cable news networks, the print media, all of them wanted to make this a case of white officer versus black victim. But when you look at these four officers here, that ruins that narrative. So if you go back and look at some of the reporting on this story, they won't show you this mugshot of all four officers together because this harms the media narrative of white versus black. If you show a diverse set of officers charged who were all on the scene and who all supported each other and who believed they were following procedures while George Floyd died on that pavement, it doesn't fit the narrative that the media is creating of one evil white officer killing George Floyd. Now again, I'm just talking about this mugshot. I am in no way excusing, condoning, or exonerating the actions of these officers. But look at who is exonerating themselves from the misconduct that happened here. That would be the city councilman officials of Minneapolis, the county officials, the state officials, the mayor, the governor, everyone involved in running the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis. None of them stepped forward and took responsibility for what happened to George Floyd. None of the political operatives of the Democratic Party took responsibility for causing the entire nation to explode into flames. No one fell on their sword, figuratively, because they said, we can just blame the police officers that we hired, the police officers that we trained, we can blame it all on them. And that's exactly what happened. So if you are a police officer and you work in a city controlled by Democrats, a county controlled by Democrats, or a state controlled by Democrats, this is what will happen to you should anything go wrong during an arrest. Democrat politicians will throw you under the bus to save their own pathetic, cowardly skins. And that's what we saw happen here. When it came time for a man or woman of courage, a politician in Minnesota or Minneapolis, none of them stepped forward and said, I take the blame. No, they all said, we blame the police department that we hired and we trained. This mugshot here, look at this carefully. You will not see this that often. Let's go focus on George Floyd's day. And this is what I really didn't want to go into because it makes it sound like George Floyd is at fault for his own death. That's not true. The police officer with his knee on the neck of George Floyd was more responsible for George Floyd's death than George Floyd. However, there is factual reporting that has been available from the start showing that George Floyd made a series of choices long before that police officer's knee was on his neck. Hey, police officers, this is America in 2020. Every person around every arrest that you're going to be making might be recording your conduct. So your conduct better be on the up and up and better be of the highest standard. And apparently that was not the case in George Floyd's case. But again, that will be determined in their trials. Let's focus on something that the news media has known about since this incident first made the news. It was a local news story first, and then it became a state news story. Let's examine the information on what happened during George Floyd's last day on Earth and just see if we can figure out what events led him to dying.